So we meet again, or are you new? I don't know. We'll have to see. Anyways, we're going to be going through free code camps and building a quiz webpage. And we left off on number 41. So we're going to be doing another set of 10 in this video. If this is your first time watching, welcome. My name is Rob. I'm a coding instructor for PreCodeCamp, and I am going to go through each one of these steps here as if I was an instructor teaching it. So maybe you'll learn something. I have not gone through any of these steps before recording this video, so I'm going to go through them as well. So if there's one thing that you can do here for me, for us, it is hit that like button here for us. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm. So anyways, let's go ahead and dive in. And as always, everything is chaptered out down below, so you can skip and go to the step that you might have got stuck on. All right, so let's go ahead and get coding. Okay, so we are on step number 41 here, where we're building a quiz web page. It says on here, for the following step, do not forget to give your form a submit button with the text send. And so for this, you may be asking yourself, do I use an input field or an input element with the type being a button? You could do that. We can also add a button element. And what is the differences between the two? And looking at this and just refreshing some research and stuff on this idea, this concept, is you can use either. Either will work just fine. However, if you are looking to add a little more styling to that button, if you're looking to be a little more modern with that button, then we want to utilize the button element itself rather than the input with the type of button. Okay, where do we put this at? And again, really you can put a button anywhere, but traditionally we see them, and it's good practice to put it at the very bottom of the form. And I don't know if it wants it down here or if it wants it in a certain section, but I will put it down here. It looks like it did give us a little bit of space here for that to happen. And so I'll just do button, and then I'm going to close off the tags. If this is your first time watching this video, I'm always telling students, telling people whenever they're learning how to code, and especially since we don't have auto completion here, put your closing tags on there. I can't tell you how many times I see it in the freeCodeCamp forums where their code is broken, and it's because they're missing a closing tag. So make sure that you do put that in there. As far as the text that it wants us to have in there, if I scroll all the way up, it wants us to have the word send. And so that's what goes in between the tag. So we'll do send, and then it says we need to make this type in here. We need to make that be of the type submit. And I believe that fixes everything here for us to be able to submit. And we can see this little send button down here, just right there looking at us and ready for some styling later on probably to get it working. But let's go and check our code. We got the congratulations confetti. We're moving on to the next section. Step number 42 in building a quiz web page, it says that it would like us to have two semantic HTML elements, and it's going to be footer and address. We want to put this after the main element, of course, and we can see up here the line 111 is the main. Our cursor is properly highlighted where it wants us to put this code. So it wants a footer, and again, practicing that opening and closing tags on here. And then inside of the footer tag is where we want to have the address. So let's go ahead and add that. And we're not going to see anything visually on our page over here, but just know that it is going to be red once we click the check for code. There we go. Congratulations. We're moving on to our next step. All right, step number 43 in building a quiz web page, it says within the address element, add the following example code. And this is going to be inside of the address. The BR tags will allow each part of the address to be on its own line. Very useful when presenting address elements properly. Again, doing a little bit of research and making sure that best practices, right? That's what I would be talking about here in front of students, is you don't want to overuse the line breaks, which is what a BR is. And for having it just solely specific for the address, best way, cleanest way possible to use. And this is to make sure that you don't have to wrap these in a div, for example. But in order to create that vertical spacing, a break or line break is going to be needed. And this is a real simple, clean way to do it. So all we're going to do is copy this, and we will paste that right here in the address section. So let me go ahead and put that on there. And let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next step. Step number 44 in building a quiz web page. It tells us on here that the address element does not contain an actual physical address for the location. And so we can use a link on here instead, and that's what it wants us to do. So it says, wrap the link around the text here of freeCodeCamp and set its location to then the freecodecamp.org. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So I'm going to come over here. I'm really just going to delete this and put it on my clipboard. So that's a Control X or Command X. And that way I can put the tags on here that I need. And so we need to have an anchor tag that is starting off here with the A. And then I'm going to paste in freeCodeCamp. Now, in order to get this link to show up properly, because you can see that it is not, we need to provide it with an H, so a hypertext reference. So we'll go ahead and put that in here, and then we're going to set that equal to this URL that they give us up here. So that's what I'm going to paste in there. Make sure that you don't put in the period that you see there, but just whatever is in the gray. So let me go ahead and check our code, but we can visually see that it is now highlighted with a hyperlink. Let's check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step. So we are on step number 45 of building a quiz web page, and it says we're finally back on the styling page, and it wants us to select the elements, the list elements rather, of the navigation bar. And why is that important for us to pick up on those keywords? Because we have list items built throughout our HTML document right now. We have them in question 1, you see them with the bullet points. We have them in our nav bar. So there's multiple list items, and we just don't want to target the list items on the entire page. We want to do it for the navigational bar only. And so how are we going to target that? Let's take a look at our index.html and see if we can connect the dots here in order to target those elements. So it says it wants the nav bar only. Guess what? We had a semantic tag in here called nav. Now we can go step into this and get to the LIs. How are we going to step into this? So I see a nav bar, I see the ULs, the unordered list, and then I see the list item. So that's how we're going to target them, is we're going to step into it from the nav semantic element. And this is called a combinator, how we're going to target this. So we're going to go into the styles, and we are going to first target the nav bar, okay, the nav semantic element. Then here's our combinator, right? How do we get down to the LIs? We have to go through the unordered list first, and then we have to go into the list item itself, and then we can put the curly brackets on there, and this is what we are going to paste in there, okay? Now, we're not going to see much change at all because we happen to wrap these items in here. If we take a look at our nav section again, we have this wrapped in the anchor tag, and that's what's controlling the blue that you see there. So I'm sure we're going to go and do some more CSS work here and maybe get rid of these underlined and blue type of things that we see on here. So let's go ahead and check our code. We got the congratulations. We're going to move on to the next step here. So step number 46 in building a quiz web page, it says on the topic of visual accessibility, the contrast between the element is a key factor. For example, the contrast right now between the text and the background is and should be at least 4.5 to 1. Now we want to change this font color of the anchor element to something that will be a contrast ratio of at least 7 to 1. Let's take a look at what we would have to do for this one, but I do want to maybe introduce you to the dev tools so we can maybe see what we are talking about here with the web page. And so I'm going to pop the web page out by clicking on this. And then up at the top, I'm using Chrome. I'm going to go up to the window menu and I'm going to choose show as a tab. And that way I have a little more freedom here with this. And then I'm going to open up the dev tools. And you can do that by right-clicking the element that we are interested in and clicking the inspect. Now this will bring up our dev tools. I think this is the first time I'm even talking about dev tools in one of these videos here on YouTube, and especially for freeCodeCamp. And right here, it doesn't allow me to edit any of the stuff right here, but I am able to add a color on here. And by default, the link is a blue color, okay? And so you can see that I didn't change the color at all up here whatsoever, but I am able to get some intel on what would be a color that could be used. And so if I click on this here, notice that I do get the contrast ratio right now. Okay, it's 1.95. Now, if we're looking at meeting these standards here, I went ahead and expanded it with that little arrow down, and we can see down here that to meet the A standard, it should be a 4.5, at least for the contrast. And if we're going to do triple A, it needs to be a 7.0. And now with Chrome, we are able to utilize these suggested colors. And so we can click on this and it would suggest what would be a good contrast color to this. And we can see now that it did put a different highlight on this right here of the info part, okay? Now we see these two little guide bars, all right? That's where we're able to choose a color. So no matter where we are on the spectrum here, we should still be good for the contrast ratio. Now, if we come over here for the AAA and we click it, notice that we moved to another curve, okay? So this not only was suffice for the AAA, but it's also very compatible as well for the AA as well. So we can see here, this contrast ratio with this right here, with this hex code should be good enough for us to give freeCodeCamp and saying, hey, let's go ahead and make these anchor tags that are inside the nav bar have this hex code here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that one to my clipboard. Then I'm going to go ahead and go back to the code here. So now with that on my clipboard, now it's my job here to navigate all the way down to the anchor tags. And remember, we only want to deal with the anchor tags that are in the nav bar. So again, this is reinforcing the whole thing where we are going to be utilizing the combinator in order to get all the way down, drill down all the way to the anchor tag. So we're going to start off with the nav. We're then going to go ahead and do the unordered list. Then we're going to do the list item itself. And then we can go ahead and do the anchor tag. And this is where we're going to do the color. And we're going to set that to the hashtag that we just copied on our clipboard. And that should add that color to each one of those list items. I'm going to go ahead and move my picture so we can actually see this happen. And that is going to qualify us here for that ratio that freeCodeCamp is wanting. Now, I don't know if that's the correct thing that they're going to be utilizing on theirs when we click the next, again, because our code does not get saved. We use what they were going to use for the form when it comes to these steps. But let's go ahead and check our code, see if we got it. Congratulations, we did. And now we're moving on to the next step here. Right, so step number 47, it says, make the navigation buttons look more like typical buttons. As of right now, they don't look at all like buttons. And we want to remove the underline from the anchor tag. Let's go ahead and do that one first. For this, we're going to do text decoration, and we want to set that to none. And that should remove the underline that you see on the navigational bar. Now, the next part here, it says, then create a new selector targeting the navigational list elements. So that way, when the cursor hovers over them, the background color and the text color are switched and the cursor becomes a pointer. Get this one because maybe we'll be expanding this to look more like a button, because really that pointer, the mouse pointer, doesn't turn to be a pointer till it's hovering exactly over the hyper that we created with the anchor tag. So let's go ahead. We're going to be scrolling up and down on this for me to get this properly. I'm going to grab the selector here that we did with the combinator. And this time I'm going to make it a pseudo class with the hover. Now it says it wants us to change the color of this, of the text. It wants us to swap the background, and it wants us to change the text color as well and swap the colors. So the way that we're going to do this, I'm going to go ahead and scroll up really quick. And I know that the color of the text, it can't be this. It needs to be whatever the background color was, which happens to be this blue that we see here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it, and I'm just going to paste that here for the color. And we can actually test this out here by hovering over this, and the text should disappear into the background, even though it's still there. But what it wants us to do next is have the background color, and it wants us to have the text color that was there be the background color. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this and paste that there. And so now when I hover over it, notice that it is appearing to be a little bit like a button. Now this pointer, like it doesn't turn into a pointer until I'm like right over the text. And I don't know if it's really hard to see, but we want to change this so that way the cursor is going to be a pointer when it happens to hit this element that we just got done doing for the hover. So now notice as soon as I get a little bit closer, I'm not even on the text now, and it's turning into a pointer. So that's where I was saying, hey, it's already a pointer because of the anchor tag, but this is just making the pointer happen a little bit sooner rather than when we're actually over it, over the text. Okay, So I believe that is all it needs. Let's go and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next section here. So step number 48 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp, it tells us tidy up that header. Use the Flexbox to put space between the children and then vertically center them. So what we're dealing with here is justify content, and then we're also going to deal with align items. And it gave us the keywords that we need for each one of these. So let's go ahead and knock this part out. It's already a flex box. Let's go ahead and do the justify content, and we want to set that to space between. Next, we want to go ahead and set up the align items, and we want to set that to center. All right, perfect. That looks great. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step. So step number 49 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp, it tells us that it wants the screen, or it wants the H1 element to be centered on there. And so what we can do for it, we can do text align. We'll do center. So that way it will center it. We saw that being centered. And it says, then give the main padding such that the student info section header can fully be seen. And so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and do main, and then we'll do padding top, and we're going to set that to 50 pixels. And if I could spell padding properly, that would help. There we go. And that should give enough space on there. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next step. Step number 50 in building a quiz web page says on small screens, the unordered list in the navigation bar overflows on the right-hand side. So we're going to fix that by utilizing the Flexbox wrap. And then we're also going to need to set the additional properties in that they give us here. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to do Flexbox, or we're going to do Flex wrap rather. And then we want to set that to wrap. By default, that does not happen. And then we can come in here and add in these extras that it wants us to put in there. So let's go ahead and put that there. And so now when, I'm assuming when this thing collapses here, you'll see that it just goes into a column a little bit for it. So it does in fact wrap. It's not being smushed together as the browser gets closer and closer. Okay. All right. I believe that is what will give us a green check mark here to go ahead and go. I know I say green, it's really blue, but to me, green check marks means that we're good to go. Great. Perfect. That would complete step number 50. All right, so that wrapped up these last 10. So we did learn a few new things, hopefully with the accessibility, going into the dev tools, taking a look at the color contrast ratio, and knowing what makes good color contrasting to make sure that you're compatible with the A as well as the AAA when it comes to the accessibility. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Make sure you give it a like, comment if you had any kind of trouble with this, and we'll see you in the next video. All right, take care.